Today I want to talk about in-app purchases for iOS using React Native. And the reason I'm making this video is because I've recently made an app, GL365 Academy Trainer, which is releasing on Friday, which has in-app purchases in it. And that was an absolute pain in the arse. It was an absolute nightmare to make because as somebody who was completely new, I didn't find the documentation to be all that clear. I was just going through, little snippets from Stack Overflow and so on, and it was just a nightmare. So I wanted to make an actual comprehensive video, which will go through how I did it, because I've seen some videos which were really good, but then they might say something like, oh, so now you just want to send this data off to your backend and have that process to do a receipt validation for you. And when you hear that as somebody who is doing their first ever in-app purchase, I don't know about you, but that just confused me because I had no idea what that was. I didn't even know I needed a backend. So I will also talk through setting that up. And it's not anywhere near as confusing as it first appears. So if any of you watching are an Expo refugee like me, meaning you've been forced to, you were making an app with Expo, React Native, and you were forced to eject the bare React Native workflow just to add in-app purchases, then you may have come across the problem of, in order to actually make the iOS app, you need to be on a Mac. Now, I don't have a Mac. I do have a Mac virtual machine, which I had to get running just because of this restriction. There are other options, like you can actually rent a Mac cloud service. I used one of them for a while called incl, and that was really good. There are a few other things you might want to check out. But yeah, you will need access to a Mac, unfortunately. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is do npx React Native init, and I'm just going to call it RNIAP. So we need an actual React Native project, obviously. Okay, so once the project has actually finished being created, we're going to open up Xcode, and we're going to go to File, Open. Okay, and within the project folder, we're going to go to iOS, and then open up the workspace. And as that's happening, you can see one of the limitations of using this in a virtual machine is this. It actually runs pretty fast, but the graphics only has 256 megabytes of VRAM. So everything is actually processing fast, but it's updating to the screen so slow that we get these, little artifacts when we move it. Once Xcode is loaded, just click on your project there, and you will see over here we have an identity section. Now, it's very important to get rid of this dreadful bundle identifier and add your own. So you're going to want it to be in inverse URL format. So I'm just going to do com.myname and then .rniap, okay? Because that is how it's going to be identified when you actually upload it to the App Store and through App Store Connect. Then we're going to click on Signing and Capabilities and check Automatically Manage Signing, and then find your account. You're actually going to want to go into the Xcode preferences if you haven't already and sign in with your Apple developer account. Now, unfortunately, you need a paid Apple developer account to do this. Otherwise, you won't even be able to get access to the App Store Connect at all, which is a real shame because it's very expensive. Like $99 a year is quite a lot of money, but there is no way around it. Unfortunately, you do have to have a paid developer account. So once you've done that, you've selected your team, you've got to automatically manage sign-in. We're going to go to Add Capability and scroll down until you see the in-app purchase capability, and just double click that to add it, and it's going to do some processing here, setting you up the certificates and so on. Okay, so once you've done that, we can actually head over to App Store Connect and actually work on creating the in-app purchase. So here we are at App Store Connect. Now there is quite a major prerequisite here, which is that you're going to want to complete everything in the agreements, tax and banking section, which is where obviously you have to agree to all the different terms and set up your tax and bank information, because otherwise Apple, they're obviously not going to know where to pay the money. So you have to go through that, which is a bit of a tedious process, but of course it has to be done. And also take note of this users and access section, because we're going to be revisiting this later in order to set up test users to test the in-app purchases. So let's go to My Apps and click the plus icon, New App, and I'm going to select iOS. So name it whatever you want your app to be called. I'm just going to call it RNAP test. Primary language, I'm going to choose English UK. Now click Bundle ID, and this is where you're going to have to select the bundle ID that we just set up in Xcode, or which you hopefully set up for you automatically. I have two here, RNAP test and RNAP. This is just one I was messing about with earlier. I'm going to select this one, which I just created right now. Now if you can't see that there, don't panic, because this is a issue that I encountered myself when I was making my previous app. You're going to want to go to your developer.apple.com account and sign in, and when you're here, click the certificates, IDs and profiles. Now click identifiers and click the little plus, and here you're going to want to register a new app ID. It's going to be obviously an app, and then you're going to want to set the bundle ID and set it to, well, the same bundle ID that we were trying to do in Xcode. So just set that up there, and then give yourself a description, and obviously make sure that in-app purchases is selected. And then you're going to have to just run through the rest of the process to create it, and then it should be there. So you should now be able to select your bundle ID. Now the SKU, as it says here, is a unique ID for your app that is not visible on the App Store. So it's basically just like an internal unique ID. So you can just make that whatever you want. I'm just going to call it RNAP tutorial. Now this user access is to do with not to do with actual when it's on the App Store and your customers. It's actually to do with people on your other developers on your App Store Connect account. So pretty much we can all leave it at full access. If you do have other people using your App Store Connect account, obviously, I mean, you'll know the limited access and how to set that up, but we're just going to leave it at full. Now click Create, and this will create a brand new app listing for us. So this is the page where we put all the information about our app. We put our screenshots, our text, a description, privacy policy, all that. Is also where we upload all our builds of our app. So what we're going to do is go down to the in-app purchases on the side and click Manage. While we're here, we're going to click Add, and there are 4 different types of in-app purchases we can make. The only one I'm going to cover here is an auto-renewable subscription. We also have consumable, which are things that are only used once. Non-consumable, which are things that you actually purchase in the app and you have access to indefinitely. And then obviously your auto-renewable subscriptions are like your Netflix, your Amazon Prime, so on. And then you have a non-renewing subscription, which is just like an auto-renewable subscription, but it doesn't renew, obviously. So I'm going to go for auto-renewable subscription here. I'm going to click that, click Create. So it asks us to enter a reference name, and if we click the little question mark, we can see that it will be used on App Store Connect and in Sales, but it won't be displayed on the App Store. So it's essentially for you, how are you going to reference it? So I'm just going to call it Premium Access. Now, product ID, this is important because this is the ID that you're going to use within your React Native code to access the purchase. Various different, style and format rules that you can use for the name, like Revenue Cat recommends that you use like the initials of your app, then an underscore, then the price, then an underscore, then the duration. But I mean, really, it can be whatever you want as long as you remember it. That is completely fine. So I'm gonna call mine RT_699_1M. I'm following the Revenue Cat style guide, so RT or RNAP test 699 because I'm planning to price it at £6.99, and 1M for 1 month. I'm going to click next. Now it's going to ask us to create a subscription group. So essentially, you can have groups of subscriptions. Users can subscribe to one within the subscription. So say you have a premium access, you might have a monthly plan and an annual plan, and they can only subscribe to one within the plan, one within the group, but they can switch between the two. And they're both grouped together because they both offer the same thing. So I'm just going to call it premium access, although I'm only going to have the one option within my app. So we can click create. And there we go, we've created our listing. We have an Apple ID for it and we have a product ID. As I say, the product ID is what we're going to use to actually access it within the app. So this cleared for sale button, we don't have to worry about right now, but that means that when the app gets accepted, it is actually available for sale on the App Store. This subscription duration, obviously, is how long you want the subscription to last. You have a bunch of options here. I'm going to go with 1 month. Okay, now we have our prices. We can click add. Asking us to save our changes, so I'll do that. I'm going to click add, and there we go. So we have a starting price. So I'm going to start mine off obviously in pounds. So you can choose your price. I'm going to choose $6.99. Any price you want. There's a lot of different options. You can't actually put in your own exact price. You have to choose from all these different options, but there are a lot, so it covers pretty much every single price point, all the way up to £899, which is mental. Okay, so yeah, $6.99 in pounds. I'm going to click next, and it's actually now going to set up the different prices in a bunch of various currencies. So as you can see here, these are all in US dollars, and it's $6.99, $8.39, $6.99, and so on. So if you wanted to be specific and change, say, United States $6.99, you wanted to change that because obviously $6.99 is less than £6.99. It's more like $8.99. You'd want to go in here and make those changes yourself. Now, unfortunately, you do have to change every single one, even though I had to do that with my app. I had to change 174 of them, and it took bloody ages. But yep, that's how you do it. So we're going to click create once you're happy, and there we go. We now have our starting price. So now we have a bunch of different options here for introductory offers for new subscribers. Perhaps like a 7-day trial or a discount or something for the first month. As you can see, the types you can have is pay as you go, pay up front, or free. But I'm not going to bother with adding any of those. If you do want to, this is where you would do it. And also promotional offers. So for example, discount codes and so on, which you might want to add here. So that is where you do it, but I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to set up the actual subscription. Okay, so now we can get out of this subscription price in window. Now we have this option for localizations. So the name and description for your in-app purchase in different localizations if you want to set them. So I'm only going to set English UK. That's all I have for my real app as well. But you can set as many as you like. But you do need to have at least one. So obviously the first one is the subscription display name. So the actual name of it on the store. So I'm going to set mine as RNIAP Test Premium Access. Subscription is going to be 1 month premium access to the app. Okay, you can set that to whatever you like, and again, there are different rules and guidelines you can follow in order to do these properly, and you can find great resources about them, but really these can be whatever you like. Okay, so now we have App Store promotion. So if you want extra promotion for the in-app purchase, you can add an image here. I'm not going to do that. Now the last thing we have here is this review information, which even though I'm not going to be submitting this to the App Store in this video, we still actually need to provide a dummy screenshot here so that this missing metadata goes away, and we can actually test the in-app purchase, because if you don't do that, then you can't actually test it. So I'm just uploading the same screenshot I used in my other app as a demo. But once we got that there, I'm going to add a little review note saying testing in-app purchase. But obviously, if you actually submit it for review, you're going to want to give, as it says here, additional information about the in-app purchase to help with the review. And the screenshot should actually be a helpful screenshot of the in-app purchase in the actual app. But for testing, that doesn't matter. So I click save, and I'm still getting this missing metadata. And I can see a message up here that's actually saying we need to add a localization to the subscription group, which I forgot to do. So I'm going to add that here, English UK. Subscription group display name, premium access, and we're going to use the app name. So there we go. Let's click save here. And now we should see, if we go back to the in-app purchase, it now says ready to submit, which is the state it needs to be in order for us to actually query it from within our app when we're testing. Okay, so we're now at the point where we can start writing some code. So I'm just opening up the newly created React Native project in VS Code. I'm going to do everything inside app.js for the simplicity of this tutorial. But you may, if you already have your app, you may know where you want it already. But as I say, everything's going to just go in my app.js because I want it to all happen as the user loads up the app. So for this coding part of the tutorial, I think it's important that you can actually see what's being typed. So what I've done is I've switched the virtual machine to scaled mode, which has stretched out the window to fill the full screen, but obviously since it's stretched, the resolution doesn't match. It's a little bit blurry. So yeah, I'm going to start from a blank app.js, and I'm going to import the stuff I need. So we have to import React, use state, and use effect from React. Also going to input a few things here, say style sheet, text, alert, view, button. That should be it from now from React Native. So then let's get our export default function app. And for now, I'm just going to return view with some text that says I hate programming, which is how I was feeling throughout the entirety of adding in-app purchases to my app. And then I'm going to add my style sheet. So it's const styles equals style sheet.create. In here, I'm going to make a container and give it flex 1. Let's have a black background. So I'm going to do background color hashtag 000. Oh god, I forget I'm on a Mac virtual machine. The hashtag isn't where I think it is. Oh god. Where the bloody hell is a hashtag on a Mac keyboard? I have no idea. Okay, apparently it is Alt 3. Yeah, there we go. Hashtag 000. Black background. I do align items center. And as well, justify content center. Just a basic container there. So that is pretty much what you'll find in your default app.js. Now I'm just going to install the dependencies that we need. So I'm going to change directory into the project, and I'm going to do npm install -- save React Native IAP. Okay, so once that's been installed, you can see here on the Getting Started guide that for iOS we then need to do your standard pod install to actually link the package. And then for Android you have all this extra stuff. I will be doing a tutorial on Android as well, but I'm not going to be covering that here. Okay, so I'm just going to cd into the iOS directory and run npx pod install. And yeah, that should just run through and set up all your dependencies and the pod files and so on and do everything for us. Okay, so once that's done, that is it for our dependencies. That's all I'm going to be installing for this. So we need to import it, and I'm going to do that by just typing in import IAP from React Native IAP. Right, and now from React Native, we're actually going to need one more thing. It's going to be the platform API. So that's going to allow us to use the following function: create a constant called items, and we're going to set that equal to platform.select. Now what that's going to do is check if it's Android or iOS, and then select something to assign this variable to based off the platform. So I'm going to set this to an object which has iOS key and an Android key. The iOS key is just going to be an array, and the Android key is going to be an array. So if you are making an Android app, you're going to want to put your Android product IDs in here. I have none for now, so I'm just going to leave it blank. But for iOS, remember that I set it up as RT_699_1M. Okay, so that is going to select our products and set them equal to items. Okay, so now within the app, I'm going to do a const, and I'm going to have purchased and set purchased. This is going to be a useState hook. So equals useState, and I'm going to set it to false by default. So it's just going to purchase is just going to be a boolean, which we set through set purchase, and by default it's going to be false because we're assuming that they haven't purchased it until we check and verify that they have. Okay, so now I'm going to use another hook called useEffect, and this takes a callback function. I'm going to do an anonymous arrow function. And then the second argument is just going to be a blank array, because this will just mean this runs as soon as app.js gets loaded. It will run straight away, and will only run once. Now let's go on to the actual code that we need. Well, the first thing we need to do is actually initialize a connection to the stores. I'm going to do iap.initConnection. Okay. And I'm gonna, just in case of an error, I'm gonna do .catch. I'm not gonna do anything with the error for now. And then I'm gonna do .then. So once we've initialized the connection, call this callback function. And for now, I'm just gonna do console.log connected to store. To store. And let's actually say in the catch, let's just do console.log error connecting to store. Obviously you can do alerts and say to user, hey look, something's gone wrong whilst connecting. Okay, but once we've initialized our connection, what is the first thing that we might want to do? Well, we actually want to grab all our purchases from the App Store so we can display them within the app and allow a user to select them. So to do that, we have a very simple function called iap.get. Now we have get products and get subscriptions. So since mine is a subscription, I'm going to go for get subscriptions. This is going to take the items array that we've already initialized, so this array here. And again, I'm just going to do a .catch, and I'm going to do console.log error finding purchases, and then we'll do a .then. We'll have a res, and this res is going to contain all the details about all the different products that we have. I'm going to do another console.log and say got products, and actually up here I'm going to set up another state called const products and set products equals use state, and by default this can just be an empty object. Okay, then I'm going to do set products res and console.log for now products. Let me run this on my actual device and see if that works. And there we go. As you can see, the UI needs some work. The text is there, but it's let's just say it's not where we need it to be. But that doesn't matter, because what we're interested in is the output in the console. And interestingly, it's succeeded in connecting to the store and getting products, but the products we've got is an empty object. What it actually is I was console logging the product state but from within this callback function. So it's actually console logging it as the state that it was when the callback function was created. So that doesn't actually work. But if we console.log this res, well, you can actually see now we're actually getting all the details about our purchase. So the currency, the description, 1 month premium access to the app. We have no discounts, introductory price, and so on. Price, product ID. Okay, so that's excellent. So that means that the subscription has been set up correctly and we can get it through the app. So let me get rid of the console log for the products. So now let's actually display it in the app. So obviously it would first help to add style equals styles.container to the view, and then text. Let's just make a quick rule in our style sheet here for the let's just call it text, and I'm going to do color white because we have a black background. Font size is going to be, let's just go with 30 for now. Obviously I'm not going to go over making this responsive or anything like that. This is purely focused on getting a basic implementation of the actual in-app purchases. If you did want to make it responsive, obviously don't use 30, use a percentage of the device screen. Yeah, that'll do for now, and I will just finish it off by adding style equals styles.text up here. Okay, there we go. So we have this wonderful looking app that says I hate programming. Let's change the text. So how about we actually output the name of our purchase? So we can do that by using curly brackets to indicate that we want to add a JavaScript object, and then access our products array, which is the state that we set, and within there we can access the title. So now, since this is an array, we want to access the correct index, index 0 for me, since I only have one in-app product. Okay, let's see if this works, and there we go. You can see that now it's outputting RNIAP test premium access, which, if you remember, is the subscription display name that we set here. Okay, but that is not actually great, because say if the products haven't loaded by the time that this return function goes, then since we're accessing or trying to access this index, if it doesn't exist, it's actually going to throw an error. So we need to avoid that, and we can do that by adding an if statement and saying if products.length, let's say, is more than 0, then we will do this, because then we know that we've fetched the products and we've added them to the list. If not, then if still loading, we can just return some more text. So I'll just copy that and say fetching products, please wait. Okay, so there we go. So now if it's still loading, it's going to display a nice little message to the user. It's going to be quite a sharp change. So as soon as the products are going to found, it's going to instantly change. So you could use like the React's animated view to fade it in and make it look a bit nicer, but again, that's all totally up to you. But this way it's not going to crash to the app by trying to access something that doesn't exist. So in the app, which is something you find out the hard way if you try to submit it without it, Apple likes you to give the name of the subscription, price, and what they actually get for purchasing it, and obviously the duration. So what I'm going to do here is add that in. So I believe from this output here, subscription period number 1 and subscription period unit month, you can obviously extract your actual period, which is going to be useful if you have multiple different subscriptions. But I'm just going to put it in manually. I'm just going to say 1 month and then the price. To do that, we're going to go into the products 0 again, and this time we're going to grab localized price. So this should hopefully display the price to the user in their local currency, which is nice. And I will obviously apply the text style as well. There we go, as you can see on the app, premium access, 1 month and £6.99 in pounds. So now we have the name and the duration and the price. The next thing we should have really is just a list of features that come with the subscription. So, I mean, obviously this isn't really what this tutorial is about. I'm sure you can come up with this on your own, but I just thought I'd make it so you could theoretically submit it if you wanted to. Because if you submitted it without this information, then Apple will likely reject it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a self-contained view, just because I'm picturing like a little, divider line between the name and the price, and then the details. Don't know why, I just fancy one. Give it a height of 4, and I'm going to make the background color white. And obviously I need to give it a width of, let's go with 50. So yeah, you can see it in the app now. It's just a little line. I'm also going to update the style slightly and give the text padding bottom of, say, 5. Now I'm going to make a very, 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 very basic table, which is just going to be done by another view. And the style for this, I'm just going to do here, it's going to have a background color, which is going to be an RGBA value. So we'll have like a slightly transparent gray. And we'll give it like rounded edges with a border radius of 10. And within this, I'm going to make some text. I'll make another style here called small text, which is just going to have maybe a size of 16. And I'll remove the padding bottom. Okay, and this text can just have the styles.text style. And I'm just going to say features. Okay, so I'm going to make another text, and I'm going to give that the styles.small text that I just created. And within here, I'm just going to make up a list of things, because the app obviously doesn't do anything. So I'm going to say add free access. I'm going to have a little bullet point here as well, using this JavaScript object. And if we do backslash, oh god, how do you do a bloody backslash in Mac? Alt 7? Nope. Alt Shift 7 or Alt Shift. Right, Alt Shift 7. No, that's not a. Oh god. Right, Control Shift 7. I mean, I've literally generated almost every possible feasible symbol apart from a backslash at this point, including a bloody Apple logo somehow. I cannot find out where it is. I'm just gonna bloody copy and paste. Right, there we go. So once you've got your backslash, you're going to type U and then 2B24. And that should give us a bullet point, and that doesn't look too bad at all. Now, obviously at the end of that, I want a new line. Okay, and now let's just fill in a few more completely made up features. 1000 wizard tokens, legendary dragon skin, right? Sounds like the kind of crap you might pile into a subscription. So there we go, that's the basic style that I'm going to go for. One more thing, I'm just going to give this a padding of 10 and say a margin top of 10. Move it down a little bit, yeah. Make it a bit more. Okay, yeah, now before I get too bogged down in the styling, I'm going to stop there and leave it at that. So there we are, we have a basic styling for our app, and that's very acceptable, I would say. So now, how do we actually purchase it? Outside of that table, I'm going to add just a regular React Native button. Now, give it a title of purchase. Okay, and then on press, well, what do we need to call here? So what I'm going to do is give it a function, just so we know that on press is actually working. I'm just going to console.log pressed. And also we're going to call iap.request subscription, and then we're going to pass in the product ID. So obviously we can get that from products 0 product ID. So let's actually try that out. So if I press this purchase button and give it a few seconds, there we go. We actually get a real pop-up, and all of that is taken care of for us. We can see that the logo of our app, obviously I haven't set one, it's just the default React Native thing. We have the name, which the first name I believe is the subscription group name, and then underneath that is the individual name, I believe. And yeah, you can see the price, $6.99 a month, and the account that you want to subscribe with. Now, if I was to actually click purchase, nothing would happen because we're not actually listening for changes to a purchase within the app. So let's set that up right now. Now within the use effect, outside of the code we've written so far, we're going to add a purchase update listener. And I'm just going to make it a global variable outside of the function. So I'm just going to call it purchase updated listener. And I'm also going to make one called let purchase error listener, so we can handle any errors. Okay, so we're just going to do purchase updated listener equals iap dot purchase updated listener. And what that's going to do is once a purchase has been made, it's going to call this function and it's going to return the purchase. I'm going to take that purchase and pass it to this function. And I'm going to run this in a try catch block. So what we're actually going to do is make a new const called receipt, and that's going to be equal to purchase.transaction receipt. So let's see if this actually works, and we'll console log the receipt, and then I guess we'll set purchase to true. I just realized it says set purchase instead of set purchased, but that's fine. I'm just going to set it to true. Okay. Now, obviously, in practice, you don't want to set it to true here. What you actually want to do is validate the receipt. And this is the annoying point of the tutorial where people will just say, oh, send the receipt to your backend and do the validation, which is obviously not very helpful. I will go through that. But for now, I'm just going to set purchase to true as soon as this updated listener is called, and also print the receipt so we can see what it actually looks like. But let's go down here and return different things based on whether they purchased it or not. So I'm going to make a new if statement. I'm going to say if purchased, if the user has actually made a purchase, and else, then it's going to run the code here that we've already written, where it says it's fetching the products and then outputs the products. Okay, right, so if purchased, so I'm just going to return something random, but what you would probably do is, say if you're using React Navigation, you'd return your app navigator, and that way they have access to the entire app from there, or just unlock the content that the subscription offers. So this subscription unlocks the entire app, because without it you can't see anything, but yours may only unlock, say, a certain section of the app. So use this purchased boolean to check whether or not the user can actually access that in this particular session. So I'm just going to return something very basic here. I'm just going to do style equals styles dot container text welcome to the app, and I'm just going to throw an image in there. So I'm just going to return this image of a dog, because I gotta be honest, I would pay a subscription to just see images of dogs. So we'll just add this as the source, require ./dog.jpg. Obviously we need to import image from React Native. There we go, there is my app. Right, so let's test this out. To do this, we're going to need Sandbox users. So head over to App Store Connect. On the home page, click the Users and Access tab. Now click Sandbox Testers down here and click Add. So you're going to have to actually have an email that apparently isn't already associated with an Apple ID, and fill in the information for them here and then click Invite. Okay, so I've just made a brand new Gmail account for the purposes of making a sandbox tester. And the email is morebloodytesting@gmail.com. So I'm going to add that here. Now you're going to set a password for the tester, a secret question, secret answer, date of birth, and the region. Okay, so once you have all that, click invite. Now on the email, you should have this, verify your Apple ID. Just click verify now. Now you're gonna have to enter your password, and this is the password that we just created. And once you're logged in, it should say email address verified. So on the App Store Connect, this should now be there. So now we have the Sandbox user actually signed up. What we can do is click purchase within the app, and it's going to ask us to sign in with the Apple ID. So we're obviously going to sign in with the Sandbox ID we just created. Okay, so I'm just going to click OK. And if we entered the details correctly, we should get the purchase pop up in a few seconds. Now, bear in mind the Sandbox test environment can be very slow. When I was testing my real app, sometimes it would take like a full minute after I pressed the button sometimes for the purchase window to pop up. And I was thinking, Jesus, my app is so slow. But it actually, once it's released, it's fine. It's just the test. It's just the test environment. As you can see, it's popped up now. So yeah, we've signed in. It says testing purposes only. We won't be charged. I'm going to click subscribe, and I'm going to enter the password. Okay, let's click subscribe. We get the lovely little noise, and hopefully in a few seconds. There we go. So that took about 30 seconds after the purchase actually went through, but now it says you're all set. Purchase was successful. I'm going to click OK. And there we go. Welcome to the app and the lovely picture of the dog. Now, if we take a look at our console, we have a wall of text. That is the receipt which we need to send off to the back end, which, as I say, is some mysterious thing that a lot of other tutorials kind of just expect you to know how to do. But if you don't, then that's a little bit worrying. So what is this back end? Well, the way I'm going to teach you it is using Firebase serverless functions. There's a couple of ways to do it. Obviously, you could maybe set up your own server, perhaps using a Google Cloud VM instance or something. To be honest, I think renting out an entire server just to run like one or two functions is a little bit overkill. So that's why Firebase serverless functions are perfect. Obviously, you get the free trial, and it's completely pay as you go. And it's if you do go over that, and it scales to the amount of users you have. So say that your app has 10 users, fine. You know, you're not going to be paying anything. Everything's going to be fine. But then your app suddenly skyrockets to, 10,000 users, then it's fine. There's no worries. You don't have to change anything. You just get as much stuff as you use. So that's the way I'm going to do it with Firebase serverless functions. So yeah, instead of console login receipt, because that isn't really useful information, and we're not going to be setting the purchase to true right here because that will set every single purchase to true. What we want to actually do is validate the receipt, basically checking if it's valid and also checking that the purchase hasn't expired. Obviously, they've just purchased it, so it hasn't expired, but we're going to check anyway. Also, we need to check when we load into the app if they already have a purchase on the account that they're signed into. And if the subscription is still valid, then we're going to let them into the app. If it isn't, then obviously we're not, and we're going to say your subscription has expired. Please subscribe again to continue using the app. So what we need to do here, I'm going to add a little to do, is validate receipt. Now I'm going to do that in a second. The first thing I'm going to do is create some more code here, which is going to get previous purchases, and then we'll validate those as well. Right, so what I'm going to do is after we initialize the connection and underneath the get subscriptions, I'm going to do iap.get purchase history. This isn't going to take any arguments, but again, I'm going to do a .catch. So yeah, I guess what you should be doing here is pass in the actual error that we get from the catch and alerting the user, but I'm not going to be doing that here. What I will do is another firework. Do .then. So once we have got purchases, obviously we want to pass them to this function, and I'm just going to call that res again, and I'm going to do const receipt equals res.length -1. So what does this mean? This means the most recent receipt, because for my purposes, having one in-app purchase, which is the monthly subscription, they might have multiple previous receipts, but we just want to get the latest one so we can see whether that is valid or not. Now, obviously, if you do have multiple in-app purchases, this might be slightly different, but this will be fine for now. And from that, yeah, we want to grab the transaction receipt. So we're making a new variable called receipt, setting it equal to the latest transaction receipt. So I'm going to say if receipt, so if an actual receipt exists, then I'm going to call a function called validate. And nope, VS Code, I don't want that, thank you. And call a function called validate, and I'm going to pass it the receipt data. But obviously validate doesn't exist at the minute, so that's something I will do in a second. But for now, I'm just going to do console.log receipt and just check that it actually prints something out. So yeah, if we reload the app here, you can see that it's showing the actual subscription, and then it's printing the receipt here. So you can see that obviously that doesn't come from the purchase update listener because they haven't purchased anything, but it's coming from the get previous history, and that's the receipt ID, but the app doesn't actually update. So what we will want to do is in the validate function, I guess, say set purchase true. So let's actually make this validate function. I'm going to define it up here. I'm going to say const validate equals, and it's going to take in the receipt. Now there is good news. That is with the React Native IAP library for iOS, you actually don't need a backend to do receipt validation. They have a function which will do it for you, will make all the necessary calls and do it for you, which is great. So I'm going to show you how to use that, but then I will also actually set up the backend using just a serverless function and show you how you can do that yourself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is say const result equals await, and yes, this needs to be an async function because we have to wait for this result to come back. And this is going to be IAP.validate receipt iOS. So this function, as you can see here, takes two arguments. It's going to take receipt body and it's going to take a boolean. So the receipt body takes the following format. It's going to be a object, which I will define now. I'll do const receipt body equals, and it's going to have receipt data, receipt dash data, also password. So what are these two things? Well, receipt data is just going to be the exact receipt that we pass in up here, so we can just put that there. And the password is actually something we need to do on App Store Connect. Okay, so back on the in-app purchases section of App Store Connect, before we actually click on the individual purchases, we have this option, App Specific Shared Secret, which is a unique code to receive receipts for this app's auto-renewable subscriptions. So we click generate, and there we are. It's a unique code, so don't share it with others. Obviously, I'm going to delete this app after the video, so that's why it's not blurred. But yeah, this is unique code, so don't go sharing it with others. And this is the password. So I'm just going to put it there in plain text. Okay, so that is the first thing we're going to pass, is this receipt body. The second thing is this boolean is test. So is it a test receipt or not? Now, the actual thing that you're supposed to do is first, I believe, check with a non-test. So set that to false, and then if that fails, trying again by setting it to true. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to default it to true. Once again, I'm going to do .catch and then I'm going to do .then. This should return us a receipt, so I'm going to have that as a argument here for this function. And what I'm going to do is I'll put this in a try-catch block. So let's print out this receipt and see what we get. Okay, so we get yet another wall of text, which is not very clear at all. So yeah, environment sandbox, latest receipt ID, which is what we've seen before. And then we have a lot of latest receipt info. Expires at this date, expires date in Unix timestamp, purchase date, product ID, price, all sorts. Okay, so that's great. It's working. We are validating the receipt. We know it's valid, and we have the expiry time, so we can work out when it will expire. Okay, so let's not console log it. Let's make a constant called renewal history. I'm going to make that receipt dot latest receipt info. I'm going to make a new variable called let expired, and that's going to be equal to a expression, which is going to be date.now, so the current date in the actual Unix timestamp, more than expiration. So is the current date greater than the expiry date? In other words, is it expired? So this will be set to true if it's expired, it'll be set to false if it isn't expired. What we can do with that is obviously an if statement. If it isn't expired, then I'm just going to set purchase to true. If it is expired, let's just alert the user. I'm just going to say purchase expired, your subscription has expired, please resubscribe to continue using the app. Oh, obviously, I didn't actually set the expiration. Let's do that right now. I'm going to do const expiration equals renewal history, and we're going to slice the latest renewal history. So we're going to do renewalHistory.length -1 and dot expires underscore date underscore ms. There we go. So yeah, that's the expiration date which we're checking here. Let's refresh the app and see. Okay, and there we go. Within a few seconds, it has validated the purchase and has let us in. So it might be worth displaying a check-in purchases message, because otherwise the users are going to be, thinking, why is it showing me this? And they may even try to purchase it again, which you obviously don't want. Maybe a checking state, or perhaps validating would be a better way to say it. I'll say false to start with. So when the validate is called, I'm just going to say set checking true. Okay, and at the end of this, I can just say set checking false. Okay, and that will go in the .then, so it actually happens once we've received the results. And then let's add an if statement for that down here. So we have the if purchase is going to return this, but we'll first need to check. So I just do if checking first, and then else. Then all this can go, because we'll have to check every time we use the app. So I'm just gonna cut all that and stick that in the else statement, and then in the if check-in, let's just say checking for previous purchases. Right, and we're actually going to set it to true by default, and then obviously set it to false one after the validating has been done. So then it says check-in first, and then displays the picture. So let's reload the app here. You can see checking for previous purchases, and now we're in, instead of confusing us by showing us the purchase. So if I sign out of the account so I don't have a purchase, by the way, you can do that by in your iPhone settings, scroll down till you see App Store, and then at the bottom it should say Sandbox account. I'm just going to sign out of it and relaunch the app. Okay, so now it's asking me to sign in, and this actually brings us to an interesting exception. What if the user presses cancel? They don't want to sign in at this point. Well, if you do that, then we're going to get an unhandled promise rejection. So in this get purchase history catch, let's just set checking false at this point. So that way they're not stuck forever if they don't sign in. It will take them to the purchase page. Right, so I'm just reloading the app. And as you can see, it's checking for previous purchases. And now it's saying your purchase has expired. And the reason for that is because this is obviously a test service, and the subscriptions don't actually last for the true values, because it wouldn't be great if your subscription, when testing, actually you had to wait a month for it to naturally expire. The subscriptions have a really short duration, and I believe they renew 5 or 6 times and then they expire. Now, you might be thinking, well, how do I make it automatically resubscribe? And it actually does. The only reason why it's expired like that is because, as I say, in the Sandbox service, Apple cancels the auto renewing after 6 times. So it has actually renewed 6 times, and the app has been working fine. So you don't have to worry about writing any more code to handle auto subscribing. So if I put in the password here, wait a few more seconds. There we go. Okay. It did take a little while, but we click OK, and as you can see, nothing happens because, if you remember, we haven't added the validate receipt to this yet. So what I'm going to do is, again, just do if receipt, then validate receipt. Okay. And there's one more thing I'd like to add to this for now, and that is that purchase error listener. Okay, and this is various errors that can occur when the user does something, like maybe they cancelled or something just doesn't work. So it's good to have this listener so the app just doesn't crash or something. So if the user cancels the purchase, it will actually throw an error, which we can listen for here. That's going to have the response code of 2. Now, for me, when a user just simply clicks the cancel button, I don't really want to say a user cancel. I don't want to give them an alert or anything. I'm just going to leave it. So I'm just going to say if error response code is equal to 2 as a string, then this is going to be if the user cancelled, and I'm going to do nothing. So if you want to handle that in some other way, you can do. I'm not going to. Instead, when there is a different error, I'm just going to do an alert. I'm just going to say error. And then for the actual text, I'm going to say there has been an error with your purchase. And then error code equals, and I'm going to add in error and slice out the code. Okay, and there we go. We're now handling all different types of errors. And speaking of error, we're actually getting one here because there's too many things, and obviously we need the end parenthesis to go there. There we go. That is the code. Now this works. You could take this and use it for your iOS app, and it would work. I will show you now how to, instead of using the validate receipt thing here, I'm going to show you how you could do that in your own backend. Okay, so we have this great code which uses the validate receipt iOS function from the React Native IAP library, which is fantastic, but it's probably recommended that you actually have your own backend that does this for you. The backend code is very, very simple, and I'm going to show you how to set it all up. So we're going to be using something called Firebase serverless functions, which is a service from Google. And we don't have to rent out an entire server. All we do is basically write however many functions we want, and then we can call those functions through a simple request and get a response back. We don't have to rent out an entire server to do that. We just basically use what we need. So I believe with these Firebase functions, you actually get free up to 2 million invocations of the function. So you can run the function up to 2 million times a month for free, and then is 40 cents by the looks per million. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to firebase.google.com and click Get Started. Now you're going to want to sign in with your Google account. So yeah, I'm going to sign in with the more bloody testing gmail.com account I made yesterday for the first part of the video, but I've already forgotten the password, so I just got to reset it real quick. Okay, so now I'm in. This is a brand new Firebase account that I've just logged into. So once you've logged in, you're going to click Create a Project. Project name, I'm just going to call it Receipts Validation. Okay, and then accept the terms, click Continue. So I'm actually going to turn it off. The recommended is to keep it on, but I'm turning it off because I'm just not going to need it. And then create the project. So now it says your new project is ready. I'm going to click Continue. Okay, so before we can actually get started and use the functions, we actually have to go to console.cloud.google.com and set up our billing account. Because even though we may just be using the free trial and we're not actually going to probably be charged anything, we still have to add our billing account. That's good. So just click Add Billing Account and then just go through this. You will need to put your card information here. Okay, so once you've done that, it should say welcome, thanks for signing up. Your free trial includes $300 in credit spent over the next 90 days, and then you're done. We don't need this Google Cloud platform anymore because now we actually have the billing account. Then annoyingly, we're actually going to need to change from the Spark free plan to the Blaze pay-as-you-go plan. Now, the reason for that is if you come here and you can see the free Spark plan is limited to the Node.js 8 runtime. Node.js 10 or later requires the pay-as-you-go plan. So yeah, if you want, you can just go into the package.json and change Node to 8 because version 8 can just use the Spark free trial. But I'm just going to change to pay-as-you-go because you still get access to the free quota, which I think I'm quite unlikely to go over. And even if you do, you only pay a tiny bit because you're paying for what you use. The reason why we had to set up that cloud billing account is because that's where this gets billed to. So now we're going to click Purchase. And there we go. If you want, you can set a budget alert. I'm not going to do that, but now we have this plan. So what we need in here is we're going to click Develop and then Functions. We're not going to use any of the rest of these, just the functions. And it brings us to a completely blank page because we haven't actually made a function yet. So we're going to click Get Started, and it gives us a little Get Started instruction. So the first thing you want to do is open a terminal. I'm just going to do this within the terminal inside of VS Code in a new directory for the Firebase project. Just copy that and run it, and it will install it globally for you. And then, so the first thing you actually want to do is type Firebase login. And click yes. It's actually going to open up a page in your default browser and ask you to log in. Right, so once you've logged in, you're going to click allow here, and it's going to say it's successful. So we can close this window, and now back in the terminal it says success, we are now logged in. I'm just going to clear the screen, and the next thing we're going to do is type Firebase init to initialize a project. Yes, we're ready to proceed. We want to scroll down to functions and then press space to select and enter to confirm the choices. And we're going to use an existing project because we've already made one on the Firebase website. Receipt validation, select that. We want to do this in JavaScript. I'm going to click enter. We do want to use ESLint to catch probable bugs, and we do want to install dependencies with npm. So that's going to run for a few seconds and set everything up. Once that's done, it's going to say Firebase initialization complete, and we've got all this new stuff. So we have this functions, and inside of there we have node modules and an index, which has a basic function So I'm going to get rid of the test code there and just show you, if you've never seen this before, how to actually deploy your first Firebase function. We'll do a really quick hello world just to get used to it, and then we'll get in with the main programming. So to make a function, we just do exports dot, and then the name of the function. I'm just going to have hello world. You're going to set that equal to functions.https.on, and I'm going to do on request. This is going to be equal to a function, which is going to take request and response, say. All right. And then within this function, we can take whatever data the user has sent to us and return a response. So we can just say response.send, which is a function. We can get access to hello and some text. Now it's time to actually deploy our function and see if we can access it. So we're going to type Firebase deploy. Now this is going to send it off to our Firebase, and we're going to be able to access it remotely. Now it should be noted that for testing you can run Firebase serve, which should open it locally. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to send it off to Firebase and we can see if it works. Okay, so that has completed. So if we go back to our Firebase, click functions, we can see that we now have this function has appeared, hello world, and we have this link. To demonstrate this really basically, I'm just going to do it in the browser. Let's see what happens if we just go to this link. Or we get a response back straight away and saying hello. How do we actually get access to the user's request? We'll have another property here. We'll just say you, and the value of that can be equal to request.query.text. This time I'm going to run Firebase serve first to test it, so we don't have to wait ages for it to be sent off to Firebase in order to test it. We actually then get this local host URL, which we can go to, and as you can see, it now says hello. What if we pass, if I then add as a query, so question mark text equals nice. Yeah, okay, so now we're actually getting the result from the user and we're doing something with it. That was just a quick introduction to Firebase functions. Now let's actually make one to validate our receipts. So I'm just going to delete this function here, and I'm going to do exports.validate iOS equals functions.https.onCall this time. It's going to be an asynchronous function, and it's going to take in data, and I'm just going to call the data D. Within this function body, what do we need to do? Well, if we go over to the Apple docs, we can see that we need to first obviously get the receipt data. We've got that, and then send it to the App Store through a post request to this URL. That's for testing, or this URL, which is for production. Now you might be wondering, why do we actually have to do this at all? As you can see here, the reason why we want to use a server for this is because we can't build a trusted connection between the user's device and the App Store directly, because we don't control either end of the connection, making it susceptible to a man-in-the-middle attack. Basically, someone could sit in the middle and see the data we're sending to and from, and we don't want that. Even though we're only building a small app, possibly, we're just going to do it the right way and use this tiny little bit of back-end code to just make everything a little bit better. So we want to send a post request. For testing, we're going to use this endpoint. For production, we're going to use this endpoint. But it says here, the best way to do this is to first verify with the production URL. Then, if we receive a 21007 status code, verify with a sandbox URL. So obviously, I'm just going to be using the sandbox URL because in order for me to use this one, I'd actually have to get the app published, which would probably require me making a sensible app. I don't think they're going to publish my one here of this dog that you have to pay $6.99 a month for. Post request is going to go to the sandbox URL, and we're going to send this request body, and in this body we need the receipt data, the password, which are required, and then this optional thing here. And you might notice that is pretty much the same as we sent using the validate iOS function in React Native IAP. It's the same data. This exclude all transactions is useful for auto renewable subscriptions because it gets rid of the old receipts and only shows you the latest one, which is what we will need. Let's make a const called data, and I'm going to set it equal to JSON.stringify. So let's obviously have receipt-data. That's one of the things we just saw from the docs. It would help if I spelled it correctly. Receipt data, which can be d.receipt data. Obviously in our program we're going to have to send this, and I'll build that out in a second. And then password can be equal to d.password, and then we're going to set that exclude-old-transactions, and we're going to set that to true for our purposes. Okay, so that's the data we need. Let's actually get that into the app. And what I'm going to do is do console.log data. Right, so I'm going to deploy this because this should allow us to see the actual data that we're sending to make sure it's actually getting there. And as it's deploying, I'm going to go onto the Mac and write some code. So this was the old code that we had. So I'm going to comment all of that out. So what I'm going to do here is make a new constant. Can be called anything you like. I'm just going to go with delivery receipt. And this is going to be asynchronous. So we're going to await the result of a post request. And we're going to do this post request using fetch. The endpoint is going to be our Firebase, which hasn't deployed yet because it's asking me, do I really want to delete the function hello world? Yes, I do. Now, if we refresh our functions, the hello world one is gone, and we have this validate iOS, which has its own URL, which we can copy. So in our code, we will fetch from this URL. So the data that we will send along with it is going to be inside of an object. The first thing is headers, and we want to make sure that the content type is JSON. So we're going to do content-type application/JSON. Then we need to make sure it's an actual post request. So we're going to say method post. And now we're going to send the actual body, which is going to contain the data. So I'm going to just do this on a new line. Right, we're going to say body, and that's going to be JSON.stringify. The key is going to be data, and the value is going to be receipt body, which is a thing here which we actually built up to use in our old function. So yeah, we're just going to send that, and hopefully we should be able to access it. Let's run this now. I'm just going to refresh the code. We don't need to worry about the output here at all. All we're going to do is go into Firebase and click logs. And here we can actually see a live console. So as you can see, all this is when we were updating it. Here is the output we're looking for. We have password and exclude old transactions. So that means there's a little mistake with the receipt data. So let's check what we're actually looking for. Here we're looking for d.receipt_data. And in the actual Mac code, we're sending receipt-data. So let's just change that to receipt-data. And if we do that, it's breaking these two things apart. So we can remedy that by if we just access the value like this, then it's going to work. And then for simplicity's sake, we should probably access password like that as well. So let me just deploy this. If we take a look at the output here, you can see that now we have the receipt data and the password, and so everything is actually being sent. So what do we actually do with this data? Well, of course we need to make a post request, as I say. So let's work on doing that. And the way we're going to do that with this Firebase function is we're using Node.js, and an easy way to make a post request is by a library called Axios. So what I'll need to do is cd into the functions folder, because we need to install it into this node modules, and just type npm install Axios. Okay, once that's installed, we're going to do const Axios equals require Axios. So we're just importing it basically. Then after we get our data, we're going to say const result equals await Axios dot post, then the URL of the endpoint. So the sandbox endpoint for us, because we're just testing. Then we just send the data, okay? And now let's just do console.log result and see what we get. Right, so I'm just gonna run Firebase deploy. Right, so we're in our console. Now, I do not like the way that the Firebase console works. It's very confusing. Everything's on its own little line with its own timestamp, and yeah, it's not great. But you can see what we've outputted is all of this stuff. So we're actually getting data back. So let's, instead of printing out everything, let's print result and slice out the data. So I'm just gonna run Firebase deploy, okay, and refresh the code one more time, looking in our console, making sure that we click the live button so it actually will update when it gets the data. Okay, and now we have all of this. So what we're after in the data is this latest receipt info, which will return an array which contains an object. Okay, so let's console log that. We want from within data latest underscore receipt underscore info, and we know it's an array, so let's just access index 0 because we're only getting the latest receipt anyway, so we can be confident that it's index 0. And let's console log that and see what we get. So refreshing the code, let's take another look in the console. Okay, and we have a lot of stuff. Right, and within the latest receipt info, we have transaction ID, original transaction ID, purchase date, receipt creation time. What we are interested in is expires date, because we want to check is the receipt expired or not. So we have this expires date MS, which is the date in the Unix timestamp that the receipt expires, and we can use that to do some checks. So coming back to our Firebase code, let's get rid of this console log because we know this is giving us the data we want. What we'll do is define a constant called receipt data. We'll set that equal to what we were just console logging. Let's do another one called expiry, which is going to be equal to the receipt data variable. And we want to grab the dot expires underscore date underscore ms. Okay, so that should give us access to that timestamp number. Now to check if it is expired or not, we can just use another variable called expired, and that can be a nice expression, just date.now more than expiry. So we don't need to do any if statements or anything. This expression will give us a true or false value. And then all we need to do is return something back, and I'm just going to return a boolean called is validated. Not is validated, sorry, is expired. And that's going to be equal to the expired. So we're getting the data, we're slicing out the data that we want, this latest receipt info. From that, we're grabbing the expires date in milliseconds, then we're calculating if it is expired, and then we'll return in true or false in this is expired. So let's save that and run Firebase deploy, hopefully for the last time. Okay, so the deploy has finished. Now let's go into our React Native code. Right, what I'm going to do from here is a dot then after we've got the delivery receipt, which is going to take a value called res and pass it to this function. Then I'm going to do res.json to convert it to JSON. Then another dot then, and this I just call this one r, which can be passed to another function. And for now, we'll just do console.log r. Obviously, let's just do a dot catch on both of these dot thens. Okay, and as you can see, we get result expired is true. So our code's actually working. So now what do we do with this value? Well, we need to check if r dot result dot is expired. So if it's true, then I'm just going to give the user an alert saying expired. Your subscription has expired. Please resubscribe to continue using the app. And then if it isn't, I'm just going to do an else. I'm going to set the purchased to true. So then the data will actually load. And at the end of this, we need to set that check-in variable to false. Or check-in state, I should say. And hopefully that will actually work. So let's reload the code. I'll get my phone up. Check into previous purchases. Your subscription has expired and now it's displaying the actual in-app purchase. I click purchase. Okay, as you can see, I spammed the button. Now I'm going to click subscribe. Okay, so the purchase has gone through. Let's give it a few seconds. There we go, you're all set. Now it's checking for purchases, and there we go. Now it's actually loaded it. That's fantastic. So if I just reopen the app, check for my purchases, and there we go. It's letting us in. So this code is actually working. We now have our own backend set up to validate the receipt and send us the result back. So all we do in our code is just say, well, if it's expired, you can't come in, sorry. So that hopefully should be everything you need to know to get a really good start into React Native in-app purchases. Obviously, you can go into this a lot further, change the code, add different things as you want them. But for now, that is where I'm going to leave it. If you have any problems, put them in the comments.